Welcome, everyone, to Creators Corner here on the Tabletop Express. For those of you who may be joining for the first time, this is the part of the channel where I get to talk with really great people in the hobby, from designers to artists to those who simply support the hobby in some really important way, in my view. And in this case, I'll be honest, I am just really thrilled, Jen, to have you here. Jenn Bartlett is joining me today. Board game librarian who has certainly, from all the work I've seen through your website, through Twitter, through everything, really brought a lot of great perspective to board gaming for many people. You've been a great advisor to me, I have to admit, in terms of my own work as a trustee. So I'm just excited to have you here. Thanks for being here today.
No, I'm glad we made this a go. And I always, for folks, when I do stuff live from my office, that it is live from my office. So there might be some randos who walk by. I already warned Chris that I've shut the door so my staff knows not to come in, but patrons have walked into my office before. So it could be a wild day at the library. So yes.
Well, I'm down for that. Look, I'm excited to have you, as I said. Let me get right off to start with this, that I have asked everyone who's been on here the same question, which is origin story. Much like superheroes, board game fans, publishers, designers, all these folks have an origin story that starts their interest in the hobby. And for you, what comes to mind as the game or two that maybe got you in?
So for folks who haven't heard me talk about this before, I'm an only child, and I did not grow up in a household where we played a lot of board games. My primary person was my mom, and we read a lot of books. So I wonder why I became a librarian then. We did a lot of crafts. Same on that too. And I mean, music and dance too are hugely part of my backgrounds. But, you know, it wasn't really until my husband and I got together back in 2004, the spry young age of 18, that we played games, and he came from a gaming family. Him and his sister and his parents played games a lot at family gatherings. So for me, this was like, what? People do this? And I'm saying this is 2004, so I'm clearly dating myself, but he bought me the Spanish Main, Pirates of the Spanish Main. So I think it was a WizKids, like, collectible, build them, put pirate ships together. And there was like a game that was supposed to go along with it. The whole shtick basically was building these little itty bitty, like, pirate ships. They were super futzy. They would break all the time, and you just basically collected them more than you did anything else. So we did that. And then when we got married in 2010, my mom bought my husband and I Battle Cry. So I talk a lot about Battle Cry. That was the first real modern hobby game that I played. And since then, I've been playing modern hobby games. My husband has a master's in military history with a specialization in the Civil War. Hence why we ended up with Battle Cry. And I have like a super soft spot in my heart for that game because it was like our first year being married. It was like a really cold winter that year. So we were indoors a lot, going through the different scenarios. And in general, I do really like Richard Borg's, like, the commands and color system too. So that's how I ended up in doing this.
You already even started to hit on the fact that becoming a librarian, you talked about it. Talk about that actual professional journey for you. Obviously, early on, there was an affection for books and all that, but how did you kind of go about making that career decision? Because obviously, and I just want to just preface this by saying, I think librarians out of professions out there, one of the top 10 most important professions. I have a bias towards librarians. I'm a trustee and all these things. So I obviously really feel strongly about that, but it's a very different job, I think, than people think of it. So to make that decision to be a librarian is, in my opinion, a big one. So how do you go about making that decision and going about that path professionally?
So, I mean, I should have known probably like as a kid when I was playing bookstore and library. And my grandmother has had this really great picture of me sitting at her house in a chair with a book in my hand. Like the writing was on the wall, right? Like, and you would say you're a dad, like you can maybe see what your kids might be really good at when they're older too. I think it's there. It's in us when we're little. Um, but I ended up going to college and getting two bachelor's degrees, one in history and one in journalism. Um, I had already worked at my local newspaper a lot, and I had done internships and lots of different things, and it was great. I was going to set the world on fire, but it was 2008.
Yes.
And print journalism at that point, too, was like it was a big turning point. And when I ended up getting my first job at the same newspaper I had worked at many, many times in summers, they were paying me less than what I had been getting paid at the library job that I had part-time as like to get me through college kind of thing. Terrible hours. I mean, just terrible. So I was like, heck with this. And I was supposed to get my master's degree in it too. I was like already there doing. But I had already been working in a library at that point, probably 3 years. And for me, those two professions are very similar. At our core values is a strong sense of ethics. Now, folks would argue about journalists not having a strong sense of ethics, and I got a big problem with that. Because I would argue that most do. We have a sense of curiosity, and like sniffing out the truth and telling the truth. Again, really strong values in those. And to me, like they were, the research part of it, again, they're very, very, very similar. So I ended up getting my master's degree, and we're still post 2008 when folks my age, our age, I'm going to gander, we're probably pretty close in age.
We're close. Actually, I will tell you, because I was doing journalism in 2008, 2009 as well, and literally left what I was doing to work for the government for like 6 weeks because I could not pay my bills on the journalism salary. So I as you're talking about journalism, I'm laughing inside because I'm like, I remember that. Like journalism did not pay bills. It was I enjoyed it, but it did not pay any bill whatsoever. I was making like $10,000. It's a very sad number, whatever the number was.
It was like $10 an hour, and in Connecticut, so like. In many states, $10 an hour might be not terrible, but in Connecticut, like, not great. Probably I would gander the same in New Jersey too. Like, probably. Not good. And that was with a bachelor's degree too. So I became pretty disillusioned with that. I ended up doing for 6 years marketing and social media. I don't think I've talked about this before, and this helped with all the stuff a lot of folks know me for. I did podiatry. I worked in the podiatry field doing social media marketing, trying to make feet look appealing.
That's a challenge.
It was a challenge. So that was interesting. But like I had, when you have a journalism background and then you put social media and marketing on top of it too. And in 2008, doing those things for a company was somewhat revolutionary. Not like today when it's like a big deal. Like you have to be doing it, otherwise your business is just gonna not survive. So that's been a huge part of my career in library land, in gaming, and in doing that. I don't miss the feet at all. I don't miss it at all.
That may be the best quote I've heard in 21 episodes of this. I don't miss the feet. That's a pretty good one. You've been a librarian though now. I mean you've been doing this for a while. You've obviously grown in this profession, and I'm interested about that connection of board games and the library, because as I talk about on this show, I think board games bring joy. I think books bring joy. So there's this natural connection. And we've obviously seen the idea of storytelling and gaming also grow, of course, over the past decade, and what we see in particular legacy games. How did you, and when did you see that initial connection from the library perspective of board games belong in a library?
So I started working at this particular library, in Manchester, Connecticut, in 2014, and I've been super lucky to have a boss who believes in me and is supportive, and for the most part, any kind of weird or wacky idea that I've had, he goes with. And I'm a firm believer in kind of like, let's try anything. If it doesn't stick to the wall, then like, okay, we tried it. It's all right. You know, like you don't know unless you try. And my husband had sneakily, and it's funny now, he had applied like early March 2015 to run War of the Ring and Battle of Five Armies for Ares Games at Gen Con. So I get this random message from him. Hey, I'm going to Gen Con. I got approved to, teach some games for Ares. And I was like, you're going to Gen Con without me? You can't do that. What? So that really, then I started thinking, games, libraries. And when I left for Gen Con, I told my boss that I was going to take my business card with me and talk to publishers. So this was 2015. Like, if you think about how things have really changed in our industry since then, big, huge change. And even in gaming librarianship, things have not completely changed, but really changed since then. So, we're teaching War of the Ring, for folks who don't know, my all-time favorite game. And, I'm walking around talking to publishers. I'm asking for donations. Like, and Rio Grande has had a super wonderful reputation in, at least on my end professionally, of being very generous to libraries. So I go into Rio Grande and I'm like, hi, I'm starting this board game group at my library. Do you offer donations? So the guy goes into the booth, picks out 3 games, and hands them to me right then and there. And that was the start of our collection here. Our group here started in 2015. It's all adults that I work with, at least on my mainstay of sorts. But, gaming in libraries isn't necessarily a new thing. It's, a lot of libraries have had chess clubs, they've had D&D clubs, they've had all different kinds of things, family game nights. But in terms of embracing modern hobby games, that's somewhat newer. The organization that I'm a past president of, Game RT, which is through the American Library Association, so like the gamma of library land. Our organization's been around since 2010, 12. But it's there. We're doing it. It's a thing. I stopped.
It's interesting though, because you're right. The modern game. I had started the board game club at our local library, and I remember the questions you get initially from a community are, "Oh, what's this? What's that?" They know chess. They know a lot of these mainstream games. But gaming programs were that. Dungeons and Dragons, extremely popular, by the way. I have to note, in my local library, extremely popular. I think we had to expand it to 2 programs, actually, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, it got that popular that we needed like another session. And then you still have, education in libraries, let's face it, Minecraft, and there's these other things that are electronic based that are popular too. So for me, it was really critical to see it. What I find really interesting about the idea of board games in libraries is that process of actually building the curation of them. And how do we build a curation that's going to actually fit a library? Because War of the Rings is a fantastic game. but not everyone's going to play War of Rings. Some people need something significantly easier, right? So how do you go about that process of thinking about this game is a fit? Is there a mission statement that it goes by, or is it trying to create a diverse set of games? I mean, what's kind of your process that you go through when you're thinking about the games coming into the library?
When I started circulating board games in 2017, so this is 2 years into like our board gaming here at my library. And for a really long time, I had been getting these donations and getting some stuff from patrons from the outside community. And people would say, Jen, are you going to let these go? And I was like, my babies. I can't let them out in the wild. What are you talking about? So, I had like a duh moment, like, duh, Jen, of course you need to be letting them out, letting them be free. It's going to be okay. At that point, I had like 125 games that had been donated by publishers. So huge amount, huge amount. So that was our collection that we started off with. So in terms of curating, there wasn't a super lot. It was just like, what you gonna send me? And I'll put it out there. Since then, so that was our adult collection. And since then, we've added a teen and children's collection. So one for each service area, we would say. And we have over 500 games now at my library, which is a lot. My selection process is varied of sorts. If I'm going to go and purchase something, it often to me will fill some kind of gap that I think that we have. And a lot of those gaps have come from gateway, welcoming, warming, whatever we're calling them now. I feel like the terminology changes all the time. It's really those games, because those are my primary audience of folks who are coming in and taking stuff home. It's the casual folks.
Yeah.
And I'm fine with that. I'm kind of bouncing off your earlier Twitter post today where, in terms of expectations, my expectations, I think, had been that some of my hardcore folks were going to come in and check out stuff. I had 6 games donated from GMT. I had Charlie Struggle, Churchill, Commands and Colors Ancients, Dominant Species. I have a story about that. And a couple of others. Like, that's hardcore stuff. That's like, even like seasoned gamers sometimes won't touch GMT stuff. But in terms of like collecting our data that we have, we can run reports to see what is most popular, what goes out the most, what style, and I can see trends. We librarians love stats. So that is very helpful for us. But by and large, our most popular stuff is party games and like easy breezy 1 to 2 weight BGG, in that kind of range there. So I'm looking to fill in those gaps. Newer stuff that I think is good, that would be appealing to things. I will take requests from folks. But, and a lot of my stuff actually comes from review copies. Any review copies that I get that we don't keep in our house go right to the library. I don't sell them. I figure they get a new life and a new home.
It's a great point too, because I always say to most people, I think one of the great flaws, I know a lot of people think about selling the games, but I say, have you reached out to your library? Does your library want some games? The library may not have a big program. I'm the one that I work, the library that I work with as a trustee, we've got almost 50, and that's not a small number to laugh at.
No,
probably half of them are donated by me. But I think that speaks to it, that we've got a lot of donations. Most of them are not purchased. And you never know what you can do. What's interesting that you said, and I want to just make sure I point it out, because you mentioned an earlier comment, one of the things that I saw earlier that Jen's referencing is I was talking about how very easy people are so quick to judge, say, party games or something, and say this is not a good game just because it's a party game or just because they don't like it. And I think that's the thing I've seen. As much as I want to play certain games or I want to bring something to the library, Jen, I can tell you right now, I could sit there and say, let's bring Scythe to the library, but my little Scythe is going to get played a lot quicker than Scythe is at the library. And that's the reality of the situation. It's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean the bigger games don't have a place, in my view. It simply means that we need to be mindful of the data that's happening. And when we're playing games, I mean, Azul, Splendor, a lot of these other games that, again, call it gateway. I really just think about the approachability of a game. That's really my big thing. Is this game approachable to a general audience? And is it going to get someone excited? So I love the way you're talking about that. Data. I mean, you've got 500 plus games. I got to ask, how do you manage a system like that? Because that is a lot of games. And libraries historically, not necessarily understaffed per se, but when it comes to staffing, libraries are not necessarily the ones that have 50, 60, 70 employees. So kind of logging them in, making sure all the pieces are there. There's a lot to that.
It is. I believe in teamwork and then kind of buy-in from staff too. That to me is super important, because when staff believes in a project or a part of a collection, they're more likely to be very positive about it to patrons and have like those positive, happy vibes going on. But yeah, so when games come back, they get checked in and then they get counted. So sometimes folks' brains melt when I talk about that. And that is, by and large, anytime I post a picture of our collection, when I put new stuff into our system, at least four or five comments about the pieces. So we have 3-4 people, including me, who count them. That to me is a no ifs, ands, or buts kind of situation. You gotta count them. So, I mean, there's slow times when we can count stuff. You know, sometimes I've recommended to librarians, you know, have a page do it, have a volunteer do it, but it's got to be done. Our example is like, so Chris, you check out The Expanse Season 1, and your library packages it all together in one package. All 6 discs are in there. And you get it home and disc 3 and 4 is not in there. It's the same thing. We wouldn't circulate The Expanse Season 1 missing discs 3 and 4, or an audiobook, Stephen King's It Bleeds, missing disc 16 out of 16. We wouldn't do that. So we shouldn't be doing that with our board games either, because part of what we are doing is we are selling an experience. So when you get home, I want you to be happy. I don't want you to be grumpy or have to call me and go, Jen, The Expanse is missing some discs. I'm really mad now. I got to come back. I got to deal with this. Because the likelihood of you wanting to perhaps take out more DVDs in this example, or board games, what we're talking about, to me is less. And to go back to what you were saying about approachability and accessibility and stuff, I love what you are bringing up there as well too. So I think sometimes people forget that this is a different audience of sorts, of folks who are coming into a library and checking out games. Yes, there are my hardcore folks. There's my, some of medium, they're into it. They don't have 600 games like I do, those folks. But if you're thinking of it in terms of a triangle, this is my really bad triangle. Here we go. Triangle. The uber gamers are that little tippy top of the triangle. We are such a small minority of gamers in the world. The ones that go every Sunday to their FLGS, the ones that back every Kickstarter, they watch every Rahdo run through, or every Shut Up and Sit Down, or No Pun Included video. They go to every convention. Those folks are, again, such a small minority. It's really the ones that are that big bottom part of the triangle there, the casual gamers, the ones that just play once a year at Thanksgiving with their family. Those are the folks I'm trying to attract here.
I always
Those
say
are my
too.
Folks.
Yeah, and I always say we want to attract people to try that. I say learn how a game plays. So you take a game, Target more recently I got to talk about it on the channel sometime. Actually, it's sitting behind me, but summer camp.
Mm.
You want to learn deck building. It's a fantastic way to learn deck building. Someone likes it. You say, oh, you really like summer camp? Like, I've got this other game you might want to try. And you could get people, and it's not about converting someone. It's just about seeing what they like, et cetera, giving them an opportunity to learn. And maybe they'll want to play Clank with you. Maybe they'll want to do something else. And you open a door. And to me, that's what this is. We open a door with our libraries and with our own sharing. I'm always the first. I was having this conversation the other night with someone about someone likes Fallout. That's fantastic. You can use Fallout as an introduction game if it's simple enough to do that. And we do have a great question actually, but I'd like to bring in here. I may have missed this, but do you ever run events to teach those medium games and possibly level up those lightweight folks?
Yeah. So 100%. So the events that I run once a month, and we had our first one back October 2nd. I run my board game events. I call them a dictatorship. They're a dictatorship. This is not a democracy. So I'm lucky enough that I technically have 3 FLGSs here in town. So I have a lot of competition. Why am I going to be different than those places that have the established board game night, board game clubs, whatever? How am I going to set what we do here apart? So we all know this, we all do this. When you go to a board game night at your FLGS, what do? You pack up that IKEA bag full of games that you want to play. And then you maybe sit there sad because no one else wanted to play, or you've already like pre-arranged with other folks that you're going to play those games. Which to me is not necessarily inclusive, right? You're kind of like segmenting yourself off at that. It's fine. I'm not saying those things are bad. They're fine. They're things. So what I wanted to do with the library, because we are a library, is to have a really strong teaching aspect. So what we do is every month I have a team of teachers and volunteers who I go out to them. I say, hey, what do you want to teach this month? So I have like Jason Perez is one of my mainstay teachers. I know I'm always going to get a cooperative game from Jason. I have really good friends of ours, Mike and Emily, who are like my Laceritas, my 18XX, my Steam, those folks. They'll teach one of those. If I have to teach, I tend to like to go towards less rule set just because I can flub up. So I purposely curate an event that has light, medium, and hard games. Because, again, I'm a library, and I've had literal grandmas show up and play Pie Town. Because I think they thought it looked cute and fun. So they came, and it was awesome. They never came back. But, hey, it was an afternoon. Like, the thing to me, too, about my events is I'm a library, right? And our goal essentially should be access, accessibility, inclusion. Those should be our core fundamental values there, right? I don't want you bringing stuff. Oh, and I don't let people bring stuff. No IKEA bags. Because there's 2 things to this. What happens, Chris, if your super jacked up version of Scythe, you've got the metal coins, you've got the minis, you've got the terrain, you've got all the things. The things! Let's say some rando sits down with you and they spill their coffee all over your super jacked up version of Scythe. What do I do? How do I manage this? That's a problem. And then 2, what if you can't afford to bring stuff with you? How do you feel walking into a room where everyone else has their bags of hundreds of dollars of worth of games? You probably feel bad about yourself. You probably feel like maybe you don't belong. So that's really important to me because I have had homeless people come to my events. That to me is like the magic here. The fact that you and I, who are privileged enough to afford these things can sit down at the same table as someone who is homeless. And all of us can have the exact same experience. We don't have to worry about money. We don't have to worry about any of those things, because my teachers have provided the game. They've learned the rule set, and we just sit down.
I love what
together.
you just said. I really do. Because one thing that was on my mind with this is when you think about libraries are a public service. There's a reason, there's a connection to government in this. And what in particular is important is that it's very easy to feel like, oh, I don't fit in. For anyone. To walk into a room where someone's like, oh, I got all this stuff. You don't know what other people's lives are like. But, you know, when this happens, people have a chance to experience like on this equal footing, because here's a game someone else brought, we're all going to learn it. And the only challenge I think sometimes is with anything, and everyone likes to talk board games, someone tries to take control or something. When you have a good teacher, the great thing is, I think you also, that's the person who's teaching, everyone else is playing, and it sets that up. So I love that. I'm so glad you mentioned it, because I do think that's part of it. And that's why, I mean, we think about it, people come to your library and use the internet, or they do these other things they may not be able to do, and we take for granted. This industry, by the way, is not cheap. Like I always, like I joke. Someone, I think it was my parents. Are like, "Oh, it must be nice. Do you get stuff? Like, are you making money?" I'm like, "No, I don't do this channel for money. One, and I'm spending money on a service to stream or whatever." And it's like, this is, as you said, a privilege. And most people would say when you have 200 games or 100 games, wow, you have a big collection. You say that to the board game community, like you always listen and go, "Oh, I got 1,000," and I'm just like, okay. But let's not compete here. But that's the reality of it. You know, 10 games is a lot for a lot of people. So I think what you're doing is wonderful. Game-wise, though, you obviously like playing games. I want to ask you a fun question that I've never asked, but I'm going to start asking on this show every time. So this is a warning for anyone else who comes on in the future. Books, this is how it actually came out for you. Books tell stories. Games tell stories as well. You go into a world. If you were to go into the world of a board game, what world might you pick? And just to streamline this, I'll tell you right now, I've thought about this a lot. For me, I would love to go into the world of Everdell. I think it would be fun, and I don't know if by default that makes me one of the animals or not, but I just think it's such a cute little world. Not necessarily the game is cute, but it's obviously very challenging and strategic, but I just think it's a wonderful world that they've created. And for me, that's the choice. So spare you a little time to maybe put some thought to that question there.
Yeah. So I had something picked out, and then I changed it because we really like Forgotten Waters in our house by Plaid Hat. So, I mean, you kind of have a storytelling game, you know, there as well. But I love the adventure part of it. I love that you're pirates. I love how diverse it is too. It's like super diverse. And I don't know, it's so bright and colorful. I really like that. I thought too about Obsession. That was like my thing I was going to pick. Kayenta games with Obsession, because, you know, I think
I still haven't played it. It's on my list of many games to play outside of the shelf of opportunity that sits to the left of me over here. I don't own it or anything, so I need to find someone who has it. But
yeah, and that I think only tends to be in print when Dan does a Kickstarter too. Yes. But you know, I mean, like, as someone who's loved Jane Austen books and like Edith Wharton, I hate to say Downton Abbey, because I think sometimes it's put with that and it's not necessarily that. I want to be one of those people on the fancy. It's like the Bob's Burgers. Okay, you live in New Jersey. Have you watched Bob's Burgers?
Of course.
Have you seen the Downton Abbey episode?
I don't think I had. Now I'm going to have to look this up.
You'll have to watch it later. It's like where Bob and Linda end up going to a Downton Abbey-esque, where they end up going in and they pay for part of the experience, but they end up being the servants, not the richy rich people, and Linda's crushed.
Oh boy, I will have to look that
Forget
one
what
up.
season it is. But one of the comments is if Calico or Patrick. Yeah, I actually thought about Calico because for folks who know, I have the ginger jerk. I have a ginger tabby who is, always my buddy George. Oh, hey George. That yeah, because we have a ginger jerk in my house, and I do sew and quilt myself. I'm like an old farty lady over here. I do the old lady things. But even like on the rocks with that from 25th Century and Pentry games, like I love a good drink, and I'd love to be slinging drinks, in that universe.
I just love the idea of it. There are so many of these universes out there now that have existed. So that's where this question came. I was again thinking about books, and I was like, but I've never asked this before. But it's just a fun thing to think about. What would you say? What's some of the most recent games that you've been playing? Any really great experiences you've had recently with a game, be it a con, be it in the library, be it whatever?
I always feel like we always have to pull out our phones. So my nerds will appreciate my Ahsoka here, because I feel like
we're gonna play that. I got my Winter Soldier here, so
yes.
Always.
Matt's my husband, and he brought home Cascadia. So Fallout Games, AEG picked it up. It's as good as everyone's saying it is, and it's perfect for a library because it's most of it has got what I really like about games is when they are not language dependent. Because I work in a community that is very, very, very multilingual. So Cascadia is as good as everyone is saying. Anno 1800 broke my brain the first time we played it. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing here. Maybe I hadn't had enough coffee. There's always that. But I have to do a plug for our buddy Carl and his game that just hit today. It's Bartwood Grove. From Final Frontier Games. It's a medium weight Euro where you are bards, different instrumentalists in the Five Realms universe, and you are...
That's my question. That is Five Realms universe, is it not? Because I have sitting behind Merchant's Cove. You can't see it behind my head here, but it is sitting, I think, below Summer Camp. So yeah, I was wondering if that was in there. But that I saw that. Always beautiful production from them, I do have to say. You look at what they produce, what it looks like on a table always blows my mind. Like, you want to sit down. If you walk by someone playing that, you want to sit down and say, can I play as well? That's always great with them. Yeah,
I had Carl. So when my game group came back on October 2nd, I did a local designers fair. So it's also super important to me for us on our end to partner with our game design community here, our publishers, our folks who I know, like, it's tough. It's tough finding playtesters. It's tough getting feedback. We can provide that space too. So I had Carl a couple of weeks ago, and he was doing Merchant's Cove, and it was like the most popular game of the ones that had been offered. Again, because its table presence is so like,
I have to ask you, because you mentioned Cascadia. Anthony I popped him up earlier here, Board Game Dad, was saying love Cascadia. And I've played Calico. And one of the things I love Calico's sitting behind me as well. I love Calico. One of the only issue I have with Calico, tiny issue, was sometimes it's just, you really, by the end of a game, there's like so few spots where you can place it. I've been told by someone that this game, it doesn't really have a feeling of, like, it feels like you can always get your pieces down somewhere, or you're always able to do that, and potentially solves that one tiny issue, because I love Calico. I will praise the hell out of Calico any day of the week. So,
but you would talk about something that's deceptive, like, it's so cute. It's got a cat on the cover. It's Beth Sobel artwork. Yay! Like, unicorn farts and rainbows all over the place.
Oh, so good.
Oh, and then you go and play Calico, and you're like, my brain.
It really
But yeah, Cascadia doesn't have that problem necessarily. You could end up possibly getting into a point where you couldn't put an animal tile, an animal Necco. I'm calling them Necco wafers because they legitimately look like that. But if you can't put the animal wafer down, you can't take that combination. Essentially, what you're doing is you have to make two choices with one move. You can put your tile anywhere, but you're going to get more points if the terrain, it's more points, a la like King Domino, where if you put more forests together, you get more points.
This is not an unusual thing. This happens plenty of games. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. I think for entry level people, it takes it up a semi notch. That's all. That's the difference with Calico. Yeah. But I love Calico. I have told Anthony, actually, again, who was in the chat, may still be there. Hi, Anthony. That we just need to get both to the table and just play them back to back. So, look, I have really enjoyed your perspective on this. Obviously, I think you can provide some great advice on this, and I certainly, as I've mentioned to you, I definitely hope to have you back on for a roundtable discussion more about how people can donate to libraries. But I want to ask you this question now, and we can certainly dig much more into this. But if you were to advise someone on maybe how they can help their library expand their board game collection or kind of grow minds, in a sense of there's more than these, and not in a way like it's shameful, because I want to be really clear. It's if people know Monopoly, chess, sorry, whatever, and they know that that's not a bad thing. They're playing games. If they're doing it with family, that's wonderful. But how can people work with a library in their local vicinity, in their local community, to maybe help, expand kind of the world of board games for people?
Talking to them. Literally. So I get asked all the time. Again, this is another one of the things that I get contacted about, and I've helped folks across the world about this. Go and talk to them. Again, my fellow librarian George is in the comments going, yeah, we don't buy it. No, we don't buy it. Like, most of us are not marrying the librarians anymore. There are still a lot of what I would call old school librarians that you might think are more of the shushing variety. But there's not as many of those folks anymore as there used to be. There's a lot of young, hip, trendy, millennial, Gen X librarians who really want to connect with our communities. And most of us are willing to try just about anything to get you in the door. Really. My biggest recommendation to folks is find the right person. Do your research beforehand. If you are looking to start a collection with them, find the person who is in charge of collection development. And then you need to think what age range, especially in a public library. If you came to me, even though I'm technically in charge of all of the board games, more technically I'm in charge of adult. I don't work with children, so you wouldn't want to talk to me about children's board games. You would, but maybe somewhere else you wouldn't. And then the same thing too with programming. If you're looking to start a program or a collaboration, find the right person. I've heard from folks, I was turned away. They weren't super jazzed about it. I was like, well, who are you talking to? Were you talking to the programming person, or were you talking to a part-time circulation staff member who has nothing to do with programming? Those are completely different answers that you're going to get. I've helped folks draw plans. I think plans going in with an actual plan and proposal is going to sell way more than you just walking in and going, let's do board games.
You do need a plan. It's true. I go back to when we started the board game club, which unfortunately COVID kind of derailed for a little bit. But when we started, we came in, here's what we'd like to do. We'd like to do one every two or so months. We're going to bring the game. We're going to teach the game. Maybe the library can buy one copy, and we're going to bring in our own copies of the other ones. And it was a very feasible idea for that reason, but we came with a concrete plan. So I like that you talk about a plan, because I can only imagine as a librarian, you're also not necessarily ready to start everything from scratch. So if someone comes in with a base to work off of, it makes your job 10 times easier.
It does. So especially too, if you end up talking, let's say you get to the right person, you found the person, hooray! But they're not a gamer at all. Like, maybe their kids play Minecraft or their kids are into Pokemon, but they themselves are not playing the games. That's going to be another barrier of sorts because you're not going to necessarily be talking the same language to each other. So you want to be enthusiastic, and maybe they're enthusiastic too. But I think in terms of, you need to like be talking librarian talk to some of these folks too. Like, what do you need from us? Do you need a room? How long do you need the room for? Do you need us to buy games for you? Do you need us to buy snacks? Like, are we going to have to market and do PR for this? Like, those are things that you need to think about. What age range, like I said, because that to me is the difference between success and failure. 100%.
No, it's true, and you do need to be able to share it with the community. Some people may not know what is this, why I want to learn this game. So be able to tell someone about the game, even give them a link and say, if you want to learn more about this game or how to play in advance and just want to come and play, here's a route of runs through or someone else who does a really good job with it. You don't need to necessarily create your own new content, I always say, because I could sit here and create a video on how to play a game, but there's already 20 million videos about it. So I could just share that video with you. Me doing it doesn't make it any more better unless I'm maybe someone in the community who is going to get some attention in a smaller community. But I think overall you can point people to that. Look, you give early, obviously fantastic advice. I certainly am going to, hopefully you'll be able to come back and we can have a really big conversation about that involvement with all the angles, the publisher side, everything, because I think it's a really important topic. I also want to encourage anyone who did watch this, whether you're watching it live or you're watching this later, take a time, reach out to your library, find out if there's anything you can do, even if it's not board games, if it's participating in some level. Your library is a critical piece of your community. And, when you think about print, your library is very often the one that's keeping it alive. So I think it's important that we continue to support that. And if you want to see something in your library that's going to excite you, you may have to be the one who starts that and brings it to the library.
I agree. And, what I say to folks is, you're maybe not going to be the first person to talk to this person about this too. And sometimes persistence is good and key. But I'll say too, you have to put your money where your mouth is and actually show up and do the things. So don't be like, oh, board games are great, and then never check out a board game or show up to an event or like share. Like, again, it has to be like a dual street there. If they're going to help you with this, you need to help them with that. And
you have to put your money where your mouth is on this kind of stuff. There's no question. When it comes to putting your money where your mouth is, I want to thank you for just sharing so much information, so much interesting stuff, and for giving everybody a chance who may not have had a chance to meet you or get to know you, the chance to do just that. I want to point out you can find Jenn on Twitter at BG_librarian. Jenn, I know you have a webpage too, theboardgamelibrarian.com as well. So some stuff there, I'm sure. Even if it's some of your older stuff, you've got some interesting things there too, I'm sure. And anything else that you want to just mention, or anyone else you want to give a shout out to, of course, before we call it a day here.
I think just for all my fellow gaming librarians who are like down in the trenches and doing this stuff, I'm not the only one out there. There's lots of us out there that are doing these things. And so for folks that are doing the work and doing the things, I mean, it can be a daily grind, but we are providing a really great service for our community. And then too, like for you listening, go to your library.
Yes.
Like, go get a library card. It's free. It's your tax dollars at work. You're going to get a huge bang for your buck by going to your library, by not buying things. We're such a consumable society too, and we all have so much stuff. Like, don't buy stuff. Like, download an ebook from one of our apps that we offer. Do a database, like do your ancestry work from your local library. You can oftentimes go to your library and do your ancestry work for free instead of paying $15 a month. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm just a cheapskate. I think.
No, well, it is true. And I always note that you have to remember that libraries also have like movies and other things. When you speak to people who may not be as privileged as we may be too, the DVDs make a huge difference for people who maybe can't go out and don't have a Netflix or something like that. So, but that service is useful for you too, because there's obviously a lot of great things there that you may want to watch. You may not have had a chance to watch, and not everything, believe it or not, is on Netflix.
Yeah.
So I want to double down on what you said and encourage that too. The other thing I do have to point out before we go, everyone, is stay tuned if you are watching this live. We've got tomorrow night Tabletop Talk, volunteering at cons. I have two really great guests coming on to talk about that from all sides of the occasion in terms of what it's like and why to volunteer. We've got favorite games, Ghosts, Goblins, and Monsters. We're talking Halloween, having some fun. That's coming up next week on the 18th. And also On the Table, second episode, where it's just a variety of people bring them to the channel, talk about some games we played and the experiences we've had. I am particularly excited about this one, guys. I have to tell y'all, Ryan and Teresa are coming back. And for those who don't know Ryan and Teresa, when I initially started this channel, it was us just doing some like roll and write stuff over live stream. And these were the people who were doing it with me. So Teresa and Ryan coming back on, I'm just so excited that they're the OG to this channel, as far as I'm concerned. With all my love to Anthony, everyone else who's been a part of it, they're the OG. And so I really appreciate that. Jen, my thanks to you. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone.
And everyone else, please, like I said, tune in for future videos. Go ahead over and subscribe to the channel. I know a lot of you follow on Twitter. I've seen a lot of you there. If I had all the Twitter followers follow the YouTube channel, I'd be around 500. So I want to up that number. So help me out, folks. Help me out. Help me get there. I'm a ways away from that one, but hey, let's progress on that, I guess. But thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions, something you want to see on the channel, let me know. Other than that, thank you for coming aboard the Express today, and I will see you all very soon.